team. We're now going to move to item 8, which is very exciting. Item 9. Auckland Future Fund Establishment Update and Letter of Expectation Approval, and I would like to welcome Chris Swasbrook, the Future Fund Chair, to the table, along with Mr Bishop and others who will identify themselves in the fullness of time. Councillor Fletcher would like to introduce this before staff speak, because Councillor Fletcher has been deeply involved in this from day one, and she will move this and I will second it. But Councillor Fletcher.
Why, thank you, Your Worship. It's been a real pleasure to be part of the substantive CCO since the inception, which came out of the Investments Working Party, and I'd like to thank all of the members who were part of that, and the officers at the time, whom I see Max Hardy sitting over there, and the advice that we received from John Crawford also. But the purpose is to protect the real value of the Trust's assets over time so they can continue to benefit future generations while providing a strong return to Council to fund services and infrastructure. We've seen the successful appointment of directors under the chairmanship of Chris Swasbrook, and how wonderful it is to see you here today. We have two other directors, Craig Stobbo and David Cullen, and can I say how well and effectively that they are working together. They've achieved, as you would know, they've overseen the successful sale of Council's remaining shares in Auckland International Airport. It achieved a higher return than originally anticipated, and also it was done at an absolute minimal cost. So they're working on the tender for the Global Investments Manager at the moment. They've been fantastic to work with. They have chosen to work effectively with Auckland Council staff, thus minimising any ongoing administrative costs. And I really want to acknowledge Megan Holly, who has done a wonderful job in terms of providing liaison. I would like to hand over now to Chris to make some preliminary comments, and I know that he's very keen to work closely with us all to make sure that this is that enduring legacy for Aucklanders into the future. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher, and thank you to the Mayor, and thank you to you all. It's an absolute privilege, and I speak on behalf of Craig Stobo and David Callanan as well. It's an absolute privilege to be directors of the Auckland Future Fund, and I commend you all for its formation. You don't actually realise you're the envy of many people around New Zealand and around the world when I tell people about the formation of the Future Fund, and so I commend you all. We as you know, we have divested the stake in the airport and are now embarking on a process to search out a global investment manager, and we sent that RFP out last Friday to 22 parties. 15 were new parties and 7 were from the original RFP that the council launched back before our appointment. And the reason why we went for a new RFP was because we had slightly different expectations and different thoughts around how the money should be managed in the future. And I think when you see the final decision and see who we have gone to in the fullness of time, you will understand our thinking and the process behind it, which some of you may have thought has taken longer than anticipated, but it was better to slow things down and do it properly. And you see, by slowing it down and doing it properly, we delivered a better outcome than expectations for a significantly lower cost. And so we're very proud of what we've done for the residents and the ratepayers in that regard. So I'll pause there and let Megan carry on.
Tēnā koutou katoa. This report is the latest quarterly update on the Auckland Future Fund establishment. It also combines the content from the Letter of Expectations, which Alistair will speak to shortly. I'll take the report as read, but highlight the significant milestones we've had in the last quarter. As has already been mentioned, the board sold the shares from the Auckland Airport and issued the closed tender for the Global Investment Manager. Additionally, Dr. Carlos Chung, MP, introduced the local bill to the House in January, and it passed its first reading on Wednesday. It's now with the Select Committee, which has called for submissions, which are due on the 8th of April. The Council and the Board will make a joint submission. And lastly, the Facility Support Agreement was signed by the Board and the Council in March. Once the Global Investment Manager is appointed, the final establishment policies will be worked on, including the SIPO and the responsible investment policy.
Good morning, councillors. I'll speak very quickly to the proposed content of a letter of expectation. Look, given the different nature of Future Fund as an entity, it's very much more streamlined, particularly in the general expectations than what we'd have with the other CCOs. I think the most important component of it is the specific expectations, which is just around Future Fund delivering the distributions to council in accordance with the fund distribution policy, and basically just setting itself up well to achieve the outcomes that you've set for it, to maintain or increase the real value of the assets that are put into the fund over time so that they can continue to benefit the future generations of Auckland. It's very much a simple message consistent with the policy decisions you made on the establishment of the CCO itself.
Thank you for that presentation. Councillor Newman has a question.
Good morning, and thank you very much, and thank you, Chris, for being here this morning. Congratulations to the board, and my question, I'm very pleased that Carlos Chung was able to shepherd that bill's introduction, but really wanting to just get a sense around the joined up work on the submissions process for the Select Committee, and ensuring that we are able to map those messages, because it's really important that the board is able to have really good input to ensure that we are providing the right context for our submission points to that Select Committee. It's very positive that it got good support during its first reading, but we want to sustain that so there's no misunderstanding as the Select Committee considers submissions and does its report back. Could you comment?
We are working with the council staff to ensure that we have very fulsome content back to them around this whole process, and ensure that it keeps the momentum that it has going forward.
And I presume you'll be available to not only speak to it when the board presents, but also be available. The council has an opportunity. I think that you should be in that room too, because this is a really good joined up piece of work, and I think you're right. This is an example of the sort of work that local government needs to be doing in this space as it moves to a new approach to its investment portfolio.
I'm available anytime, so I will ensure, and if the other directors need to come, they will make themselves available as well. But me as chair, I'm available anytime to ensure smooth passage and that the appropriate message has been delivered.
Good question, good answer. Councillor Walker has a question.
Sure. Couple of questions. Is it still envisaged that we may put some of our self-insurance, if that's the right category, into this fund? Are you familiar with?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Look, it was originally proposed when the fund was set up that was a possibility to run self-insurance fund through this future fund, but look, that wasn't ultimately passed, so it's currently not on the agenda.
So it's not on the agenda now, but is it conceivable that we could revisit that at a later point? Because obviously
it's conceivable, but just to remind, that was your decision to move away from the self-insurance purpose for the scheme.
Okay, and the other question I've got going forward is, quite obviously we'll have a phase where we're going to see what the return is from the fund. Let's say, and I would expect it will be the case, that the fund's particularly successful and that the return on the fund is better than our cost of capital, and that's anticipated. Are we in a position to make budgetary decisions to put more money into the fund by raising capital on the part of council and building up the fund, because we could be in a better financial position as a consequence? And that might be partly around what the money's invested in, because council's got a requirement for maybe more liquidity at some time than others. So if you've got a diversified asset portfolio, that could well enable that.
It's a governance decision, really, so it's perhaps something for our officers to respond to.
Yeah, through the chair, look, it's really a decision for this group to make whether future assets or the proceeds from future assets or other capital goes into that fund. So it's really a decision for the governing body to make at some stage in the future, should they deem it a sensible thing to do.
And the last question I've got, given that we're starting to take an investment approach on the part of council, this is really a governance question. Are we going to be looking at other parts of council in terms of our property portfolio, investment in other areas? That could include stadiums, for example, and taking an investment approach in respect of looking at the return on the money that we put in, which is often significant amounts of capex on an ongoing basis, so that as much and all as we've got the fund that clearly has some investment metrics around it, that we're taking a more business-like approach to the balance of our assets.
Councillor, through previous resolution, you have called for advice about what the future opportunities for the fund might be in that regard, and that'll be forthcoming. I can't recall the exact time frame. I think it was by the end of June. Yeah. So yes, and there'll be advice coming by June.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. This is probably a little bit of a process question. I understand why this has come to us at governing body today. You know, this is the establishment update. This is the first time we've done this, and it's great to have you here. But I just wanted to query, this will be coming to CCO in the future, is that correct? CCO oversight? Because it should be sitting there with the other CCO stuff, and I'm particularly mindful we don't have a Haukura rep at governing body, whereas we do have Haukura reps at the CCO Oversight Committee, so I'm just wanting to check that that's the intention in the future. It also enables us to look at those CCOs more collectively.
I think the initial resolution when the CCO was established, there'll be regular updates on the establishment phase of the CCO. I guess it's a matter of when does the establishment phase end and we move into regular performance reporting. The terms of reference of the CCO Direction and Oversight Committee would cover this entity as well.
I think that was a long way of saying yes, from now on it's probably going to be at CCO Oversight. Is that, can I just check?
I think the short answer is yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just for the record, I don't sit on that committee, but I do try to attend.
Councillor Watson has a question.
Got a question about the liquidity support that's referred to at point 23 in the paper. Says the future fund will provide liquidity support, emergency funding to the council. In the case of extreme financial emergency, the council could call on the liquidity support to temporarily borrow money from the fund. So, first of all, what's the definition of temporarily? What is there a time limit put on that? And what would conceivably happen in a situation where there's maybe another big weather event government, hasn't got the sort of financial resource that it may have had this time, and says, okay, Auckland Council, you're sitting on a big future fund there that's you've said that can deal with an emergency. It could be that could be used or called upon in that situation. What's the guarantee for then it getting replaced in a timely manner? And I think there's another item coming up about the Built Heritage Fund, which was 60 million, change in the LTP. It's now been reduced to 15 million, as we're going to find out in the paper. So what are the real guarantees over that time limit then for resorting to the access to the future fund?
Yeah, look, through the chair, look, this is designed really for things like a financial market emergency, something way more extreme than, for example, the global financial crisis. What we have at the moment is we have in place standbys with banks and other liquidity facilities, and this was an option, a cheaper option, which allows us to save the commitment fees that we currently pay to banks. So look, it's a very, very unlikely event. It would be the last facility that we would try and access, and it is on a temporary basis. So when the normal financial market conditions resumed and we could access our normal sources of funding through bonds, etc., we would repay that money by raising bonds. So temporary, it may be as short as a couple of weeks, it may be a couple of months. But again, this is a very, very unlikely event to occur.
And in that scenario, having regard to the liquidity facility, and it's in a time of severe distress where the council cannot access funding lines, cannot access the bond market. That's an extreme scenario when you think about it. You want that money offshore as well, because think about the New Zealand dollar, and so when we talk about a global mandate, this is why we're thinking about these things. You have to plan for the unexpected, and so we've been working through all of these things. But it is in the extreme, but we've made provisions for it so that you can access capital if it's needed. And when we bought that capital back, it would be worth more, you would expect, because it would be such an extreme environment that you would see devaluation. It would be reasonable to expect devaluation in New Zealand assets just because of the circumstance.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that in terms of congratulations and positivity, the decision to sell our legacy Auckland International Airport shares was a very divisive one. We realise, and a lot of people out in the community realise, that the ongoing dividend that the company would have paid this council has now been wiped out. And instead of a solid long-term infrastructural blue chip investment, we have a bunch of cash. And so it's okay for people to feel proud of what they've done, but that is not universal in this room and in this community. Bear that in mind. Thank you.
We are a broad church. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you very much. So, of course, much of this discussion is above my pay grade. I'm a mechanic. But all I can do is sit around these rooms and listen to all things that are said and try to make sure that they fit together in a way that gives me confidence. And I know that I harp on about this subject. John's going to know what I'm talking about. But I was in a special meeting with one of ours, with Watercare a little while ago, where we had a delivery from an insurance company specialist who told us that if we're going to self-insure part of our insurance risk, the insurance companies will only accept that as true self-insurance if we can show liquidity to be able to cover that insurance risk. And I've been told in other places the insurance risk, if we cover the first 10 million of every policy, is around about $1 billion. So, if our future fund is not that liquidity that we're going to use to justify a self-insurance consideration, what would be?
Through you, Chair, this is probably a little outside the scope of the future fund, but what we do have at council is also a self-insurance fund, which was established several years ago, and that's capitalised now to about 70 million. So that provides us the ability to provide self-insurance on a number of our insurance policies. And the other way we access liquidity for these unforeseen events, which may not be covered by insurance, is really through having spare capacity in our balance sheet. And in simple terms, that means having debt headroom availability before we start to reach our debt to revenue thresholds and things like that.
What doesn't connect for me is, so you were sitting in the meeting where I questioned a specialist and said, are you saying that an insurance company will not accept us as carrying self-insurance if we don't have a liquid amount to show that we can draw down on a claim up to 1 billion, and therefore they would they would average any claim we made? And the person came back and said, yes, I was right. And then I asked if our future fund was going to be that liquidity that allowed us to do this self-insurance. I have spoken to you before. There's only $50 million in our self-insurance policy, and we're only adding around $5 to $7 billion a year. And we've got, there's only $50 million in our self-insurance account. We're only adding $5 to $7 million a year, but we're accepting that there's $1 billion worth of risk. We're correct?
Yeah. Through you, Chair, on any individual policy at the moment, the self-insurance fund's only taking 10 million of risk. So there's plenty of capital in there to pay our portion of any loss. And after that 10 million, so the coverage above 10 million is placed with the external insurance markets up to the limits which we've bought, which are between $1 billion and $1.5 billion, depending on which property program we're looking at.
But I was told that the risk is being taken on the first 10 million of every policy. So in other words, all policies under 10 million and the first 10 million of every big policy, and in a catastrophic failure, we would have multiple claims on our self-insurance fund, correct?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I guess though those policies are all uncorrelated to some extent. So you might have, for example, a claim under both our above and below ground property programs, but a lot of the other policies relate to unrelated liability issues and things like that. So it would be very, very unlikely to have a number of claims or events which would completely wipe out that self-insurance fund. And if that was the case, remember, we still have balance sheet capacity to make up in the unlikely event any difference.
Okay, thank you. So all I'm trying to ascertain here, so that I can go back to the people who elected me, is that and I commend you on what you say about what our future fund can do, but I just want to be able to go back and tell them the future fund is truly a liquid asset that we can, that is what you say, and not actually sitting in the background with a iron ball around its leg, because it has to be there to secure our insurance situation. Insurance is a big problem going forward.
Point of order, Mayor. Just a point of clarification. The future fund isn't self-insurance, so we just need to make
that's
this
what I'm
clear.
trying to ascertain.
But we decided it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
It never was. So we just need to make sure, because it's quite important to not confuse the public. We're not using this fund as self-insurance.
That's correct.
Sure. That wasn't what we were told in the very first discussions about the future fund, was it?
It was an
option. That was an
It
option.
was an option we foolishly voted down.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there we are. Okay, thank you very much for that, ladies and gentlemen. You can retire. Thank you for coming there, Councillor Mr. Christopher Swasbrook.
Sorry, Mayor. It was just one question before.
Right.
Quick question before we left. Just on the question of the loss of the airport shares, and probably too hard off the top of your head, but it's still the intent for the board to be trying to obtain about two or three times the dividend through the future fund than what the airport shares was bringing. That was the point. I know you can't probably name numbers off the top of your head.
Absolutely.
2 or 3.
Yeah, the expectation is that we're going to deliver you a return of 5.24% on the money, which is much higher than the Auckland Airport dividend yield, because, as you know, the Auckland Airport is facing significant capex hurdles for the next decade, so their cash flows will be severely constrained. So you are switching an asset that was yielding 1 to 2% to a yield that is going to be much higher than that.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just clarifying because it sounded like we were losing, but the point of this will be getting that 2 or 3 times the yield. The other thing is there's still the aim through this letter of expectation is to be putting in hopefully around 20 million a year back into the fund to grow it. So aside from the return, that's, it's not going to be the same every year.
The expectation is that we will deliver 7.24%, and we will retain 2% and deliver to the council 5.24% on the money.
That's it. Don't make it any more complicated than that. We all voted on that. Thank you very much for attending. You guys can step back in case there is some possibility of...
Mr. Mayor, I put a partai in the comment there.
All right. Let's have you, Councillor Filipaina. We didn't see that, sorry. Is a comment?
That's all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. No, it's a partai. It's a question.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Just to the team, Morena Koutou, can you tell me how much it has cost? I see in number 55 of the financial implications, the cost of establishing and operating the fund has been provided in the operational budgets for the LTP. Is there a final figure as to the establishment? Because I know you put in there that the ongoing operational will be 400,000 per year.
Through the chair, so the budget for this year was to establish a fund and have the running costs for the first year was set at 700,000. I can say we haven't utilised all that budget. So an additional 300,000 in addition to the ongoing expected overhead costs of around 400,000.
So of the 700, how much have you utilised in regards to establishing the fund?
I haven't got those figures on me, but it would be a very low figure. I'm trying to think if there's hardly any costs that have been incurred. A few legal costs.
We can come back with a proper number, but it would be de minimis.
Okay. When you say de minimis, we were told during this that it was going to cost approximately 550,000 to establish. Are you saying that it's going to be way less than 550 to establish this particular fund, but you haven't got a figure? Is that what you're saying?
That is what we're saying.
Oh, I look forward to the figure, and obviously noting the 400,000 operational cost. Just the last part, Mr. Mayor, and that's to Chris. Chris, you mentioned earlier that apparently this Auckland Future Fund is the envy of everybody internationally that you've spoken to and domestically. Is that the same view when you advise them what was sold or what was given to start this fund up?
They absolutely, I've articulated to them how, and most people in New Zealand understand where the money came from for the Future Fund, and obviously when I'm talking to people overseas, I've articulated how the money has been seeded into the fund, and people are positive on it, as I said. I mean, it is unique.
Okay.
It is unique and long-term focused, which will be for the benefits of the residents and the ratepayers in the long term.
Yeah, I know it's unique, but we've had other iterations of this. So I say thank you and look forward to finding out how much it costs to establish it. Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's it, please. I've got a big day to go on. Thank you, gentlemen. Escape the table while you can. Has anyone got any comments? Or comment? Councillor Hills, please.
Oh, it was just a brief comment, and I was going to ask the question, but speaking to Chris, just want to congratulate the team on, we budgeted $13 million for transaction and other costs through this process through the sale, and they spent $0 on that. So just
I think
it's quite a big number. Not only did more go into the fund than we expected, but actually the transaction costs we budgeted, I think, saved about $12 million.
Yeah, I think that puts into perspective the question from Councillor Filipaina. They're now $30.5 million ahead of where we thought we were going to be, and the current price today is less than we sold it for. So that's only short-term thinking, but the short-term is pretty good, but this is aiming at a long-term thing. So thanks very much. I'm going to put that motion that we, no. Oh, sorry, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just a very quick comment in amongst all the accolades and backs slapping that's occurred today. I was looking at the section to do with the sale proceeds of 1.3 billion, net proceeds of 1.288 billion, plus the already for the first tranche of, I think it was 835 million, so 2.123 billion, which by any measure is a very significant sum of money. And I don't know through all of this process if there's been any acknowledgement of the people who provide that 2 billion to us today, which are the councils who held on to the airport shares. By definition, if they'd been like North Shore or Rodney or the other ones, they would have been long gone. There would have been no 2.123 billion for this august body to put into funds and to pay down debt and everything else. So coming from one of the councils that didn't do that, I really want to acknowledge the stewardship of Manukau and of those people in Auckland City who held on to those shares during that time of phenomenal capital growth. So there was a 7-year period there where the value of those shares in terms of capital growth went up about, I think, 1.4 billion from memory, and that wasn't including the returns on dividends. So as a person who likes to occasionally acknowledge people who provide or have foresight to provide in the future, I think it's very important that that phenomenal 2.123 billion didn't just materialise out of the ether. It was down to the financial stewardship of the people, good people from Manukau and the people from Auckland City. So I hope people realise that in amongst all the warm and hearty congratulations that are getting dished out today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I just want to tautoko what Councillor Watson said, and I just want to add to that too a special mention of Sir Barry Curtis, who was the leader for a very long time in the Manukau City Council and had that foresight and great leadership through those decades. And I know that he's not well, and I've heard recently that he has come out on a few public occasions, so that was good to hear, but I know that he's not well, so I just wanted to acknowledge him and his leadership and all of those past councillors from Manukau City and Auckland City for doing exactly what Councillor Watson said, for having that foresight to hold on to their shares when everybody else sold them off for short-term benefit. I just wanted to say too, Chair, that as we heard around just in that last part, there were $13.5 million up, extra money that we thought we were going to spend that we didn't. So I would like us, if we can, and I know that the local boards have sent through some advocacy on this as well, to put that into the Fix and Finish Fund, which is only a $20 million fund, and we're potentially looking at divvying that up between 13 local boards. But if we do have that spare $13.5 million as one way to acknowledge the good stewardship from those former city council areas, I would ask our governing body to consider, and our staff, to look at perhaps putting that 13.5 million into the fix and finish fund so that we can actually fix and finish a few projects in those two mighty areas of our city. Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Filipino, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I won't cover off what Councillor Watson and Councillor Foley has said, but I will, however, put in front of everybody around that table and sort of say that the original advice from our staff, and I think it was John, original advice was 550,000. We get told now that it's just going to be, I forgot the word that Chris used, but it was a flash word, but it was basically minimal. So I wonder which advice that we're now getting was wrong or way off the mark if it was the original one. So, I mean, we need to have a look as to why that happened. In regards to the shares, totally agree, Councillor Watson, in regards to the Manukau Days. And I actually had the pleasure of doing the tour of the temple at the Latter-day Saints Temple with Sir Barry Curtis yesterday. So it was interesting and very good to see him. So look, I do look forward. I look forward, and this is my last comment, but I look forward to see what happens after the international airport do the work that they do. And I mean, you know, there was a comment by Chris around 10 years and low interest rate. Well, let's see what happens after 10 years. Nobody's going to know, and just see what the dividends are there. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you very much for those who have participated in that debate.
I wanted to make a comment myself, and I will at this stage. I want to acknowledge the legacy and the leadership of Sir Barry Curtis, who not only held the shares for all those years, but actually built them up, and Dame Kath Tizard, the Mayor of Auckland, who also defended that share legacy when all around them other TLAs were flogging them off. Because of their leadership and their vision, that's why we have that money today. And though it's certainly not a long-term investment, as it once was, a bunch of cash with $500,000 a year perhaps clipping of the ticket, it's through their leadership and their vision and their strength and generosity of heart that this came about. And we should never forget that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. They did, of course, hand over higher levels of debt as well, but that's another issue. Councillor Fletcher, please, and I want to get on with the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to acknowledge Chris Swasbrook for coming in today and to highlight to this council the challenge for directors like Chris. They probably find it quite arduous. They're not familiar with the political and the robust environment. And so I really do want to acknowledge his absolute commitment to working with this council and the officers and to be prepared to answer any questions that you might have. It is appropriate that others have highlighted the legacy councils. I was the Mayor of Legacy Auckland City and used my casting vote to prevent the sale of Auckland City's shares. But timing is actually very important, and I felt very uncomfortable in previous terms of this council that we squandered other funds and the money was frittered away, in my opinion. So when it became clear that these shares needed to be realised, I was very keen that there be an enduring asset for the future, and I really applaud you, Mr. Mayor, for hearing that and ensuring that these funds cannot be frittered away into the future and to highlight the fact that this is going to be enshrined in legislation. And it was very pleasing to see all of the parties, the political parties in Parliament, actually supported that. So Councillor Newman makes a very important point in terms of moving forward. We need to make sure that our submission is one that is united and is going to be sufficiently strong that we can protect this fund going forward and give the public the confidence of knowing that in addition to the trust, there is the second tier of protection, and that will be there. But it certainly has been my experience in the meetings that I have attended with the directors. They are utterly committed to being clean, lean and mean. And they have demonstrated to officers that many of the transactions can be undertaken in a more cost-effective way, and that is to be applauded by them. But to say thank you to Sir Barry, I'd like to say thank you to all of those, and particularly the councillors who served with me in that time when it seemed to be my casting vote on everything. And I am reminded of that nightly as I walk past the cartoons that actually sit in the entrance to my kitchen, what it is to actually take courage and act in what you think is the best interest in that time. It doesn't need to be a position that you preserve forever, but what is the best interest for the time? And right now, I think the Auckland Future Fund will be something that they're still talking about in 20, 30, 40 years' time. So I'd like to thank everyone who has been able to help us move to this point, but particularly the directors who are going to do such a good job to act with good stewardship for these funds that have been entrusted to them.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I had hoped it would last, but Councillor Leone wants to add a little bit to this.
Final comment, just following on from Councillor Watson. Look, I really agree with a number of those comments that have been brought up, that I feel, yes, we do need to obviously move forward with this future fund, but the concerns raised around actually any of that money going back to those councils, Manukau and Auckland Central, it's a huge concern for me. And I hope that in the future, when we do look at discussing where this money is going to go and the dividend that we get back and the money that we receive from this future fund, the money that we receive, that we are going to prioritise that, because no, I think it's still very, very raw that those shares have been sold, and I still can't see how that money is actually going back, any of that money is going back to those councils. So I just wanted to finish on that note. Kia ora.
Okay, we are actually the Auckland Council now. Things have moved on a little. I'd like to thank everybody, and while we're thinking back those people, we'd like to thank Ngāti Whātua for giving the land to create Auckland. I'd like to thank various other wonderful people who've done good things in the past, Sir John Logan Campbell and everything, so we can go back to the first creation of the world. Thank you very much, everybody.
So Dovemai Robinson too.
I'm going to put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, thank you very much. We are now moving on to the group remuneration policy, item number 10. And I will welcome Wendell de Koon